As incredible as it seems, racial discrimination is still a major issue in the world today, even as the countries we live in have become more multicultural. Australia has had its fair share of interaction with the CERD committee responsible for ensuring adherence to the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. One of the most famous cases comes from a sporting oval in Toowoomba, a small town in rural Queensland. In 1960, a grandstand had been named after the legendary 1920s footballer E.S. Brown and was emblazoned with his name, including his nickname, Nigger. Indigenous activist Stephen Hagan fought to have this taken down for almost 10 years, first in the district and state courts, where he was dismissed, then to the High Court, who found it out of their jurisdiction. Finally, Hagan took the challenge to the United Nations, where the committee recommended to the Queensland government that the sign be taken down. Though the government chose to accept the High Court's ruling instead, the sign was taken down when the grandstand was demolished in 2008, and it has been agreed that any references to Brown in the new building will not contain his nickname. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights demands that all humans are treated equally, and specifically notes that race or ethnicity are no reason for a person to be denied access to fundamental human rights. This was ratified in 1948. However, the United Nations soon realised that this was not enough to put a stop to crimes and discrimination motivated by race. Through the 1960s, as more anti-Semitic incidents occurred throughout the Arab world and elsewhere, the UN moved to draft a new document which would clearly set the standards and expectations of member nations in terms of their treatment of people of other races. Adopted by the UNGA December 21, 1965, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination was one of the most widely supported treaties within the UN, with over 150 signatories. When the states sign on to this convention, they're committing to several things, including not to engage in any act or practice of racial discrimination against individuals, groups of persons, or institutions, and to ensure that public authorities and institutions do likewise. Not to sponsor, defend, or support racial discrimination. To review government policies and amend or repeal laws which create or perpetuate racial discrimination. To prohibit and put a stop to racial discrimination by persons, groups, and organisations. To take special measures, as necessary, to ensure that disadvantaged racial groups have full and equal access to human rights and fundamental freedoms. To combat the prejudices that lead to racial discrimination and eliminate the barriers between races through the use of education and by encouraging multiracial organisations and movements. And to prohibit organisations and propaganda that promote racial superiority, racial hatred, racial violence, or racial discrimination. What's interesting is that Australia has submitted a reservation to this requirement and is not fully bound by it. Because of this, no international law was applied in cases such as that of Andrew Bolt's set of articles criticising fair-skinned Indigenous Australians. There's no doubt that in Australia, the life expectancy and living conditions of our Indigenous people is an enormous challenge for the nation to face. No group is more disadvantaged, and if you're passionate about ending racial discrimination and inequality, campaigns like Close the Gap by Oxfam offer you the ability to enact change. Groups like the Human Rights Council of Australia and the Australian Human Rights Commission also do a lot of research and activity based on racial disadvantage. The only way challenges such as these will be overcome is by seeking understanding and being truly engaged with the issues. If this sounds like you, head over to unyouth.org.au and join us in our goal to educate and empower young people across Australia.